"You don't belong here, Marcus. People like you should remember their place." The words cracked like a whip across the quiet lecture hall, the voice of Professor Harlan echoing off the high ceilings. His face was red with rage, his finger stabbing the air toward the young black student standing frozen near the front row. For a moment, the room went silent, every student staring, breaths held, as if the world had tilted into some cruel spectacle no one had asked to witness. Marcus's knuckles tightened around the strap of his worn-out backpack. He hadn't even spoken out of turn. He had only asked a question about the reading, the kind of thoughtful question any professor should have welcomed. But here, under Harlan's glare, it became ammunition for humiliation. The lecture hall was almost empty now. Most of the students had slipped out when class ended. Only a few lingered in their seats, unsure whether to leave or to witness what had just erupted. Evelyn, a quiet girl who often sat in the back, kept her eyes lowered, shame flushing her face even though she wasn't the one being targeted. Jacob, a teaching assistant in his mid-20s, stood frozen near the desk, his mouth half open but no words coming out. No one moved. No one dared to intervene. Marcus forced himself to breathe. The weight of the words pressed on his chest, but he straightened his shoulders. "Professor," he said slowly, his voice trembling but steady, "I asked about the reading." "That's all," Harlan sneered. "Don't play the victim. You think you can come into this institution, with your background, and question me? This university has standards." His emphasis on your background was deliberate, a blade sharpened for one purpose. Marcus felt the sting, but didn't look away. His father had told him years ago, when he left their small neighborhood, to pursue this scholarship. "They'll try to push you down, son. You don't let them." And yet standing there, under the heat of Harlan's contempt, it felt like the ground itself was tilting away from him. The moment ended when Harlan turned abruptly, snatched his notes from the desk, and stormed out, leaving Marcus standing in silence. Chairs creaked as the few students left behind slowly gathered their things. No one spoke to Marcus. No one even looked at him, as if his pain might be contagious. Only Jacob lingered. His face was pale, his hands twisting nervously. He approached Marcus cautiously. I'm sorry you had to go through that," he murmured. What he said was wrong, completely wrong. His voice was low, as though afraid the professor might still be lurking somewhere. Marcus looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Jacob flinched. "I should have," he admitted. He's my supervisor. If I go against him, He trailed off, guilt flickering in his eyes. Marcus didn't respond. He just nodded once, tight, and left the room. His sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished floor, echoing into the empty corridors of the university. The university courtyard was nearly empty when Marcus stepped outside. The evening air was cool, crisp with autumn, and the brick pathways were lined with golden leaves. Students hurried past with books tucked under their arms, laughter drifting from small groups. But Marcus felt invisible among them. His scholarship had been a dream, his mother's tears of joy, his father's proud handshake, the entire neighborhood cheering him on. But moments like this threatened to crush it all under the weight of a single man's prejudice. He sat on a bench under a fading oak tree, staring at the notebook in his lap. Words blurred across the page. His question had been about a passage from the text, something he had spent hours preparing for. And yet, instead of praise, he'd been told he didn't belong. His throat tightened. Evelyn appeared then, her steps hesitant. She paused before the bench, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack. "Marcus," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "I just wanted to say, what happened back there? It wasn't right. Harlan, he's—" She shook her head, struggling. "He targets people. I've seen it before. But tonight, it was worse. It was ugly." Marcus studied her. She looked sincere, but her eyes darted nervously, as if speaking out carried danger. "Why don't people ever speak up?" he asked, her lips pressed together. "Because it's easier not to," she whispered. "But I think someone should. You don't deserve that." It wasn't much, but it was something, a crack of light in the suffocating dark. Marcus gave her a small nod. Later that night, Marcus sat in his small dorm room, typing. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from determination. He wrote everything down. Harlan's words, the silence of the room, the shame pressed on him, like a weight. It wasn't just for himself. It was for every student who had been told they didn't belong, for every voice silenced in classrooms meant to inspire. Jacob's words replayed in his mind. "He's my supervisor." Evelyn's, "It wasn't right." The university prided itself on diversity, on fairness. But behind those walls, the truth was uglier. Marcus saved the document, then leaned back. Tomorrow, he would decide whether to file a formal complaint, whether to risk everything he had worked for. But tonight, one truth burned clear. He did belong here, and no amount of Harlan's hatred would erase that. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the dorm blinds, but Marcus barely noticed. He hadn't slept. His mind replayed Harlan's words over and over, the anger in his face, the silence of the students. Every time Marcus closed his eyes, he heard it again. "You don't belong here." At breakfast in the cafeteria, Jacob slid into the seat across from him. His eyes darted nervously, as if someone might overhear. "Marcus, I couldn't sleep either," he admitted. "What Harlan said, it crossed a line. I've seen him be strict, even arrogant. But that—" He hesitated. "That was hate." Plain and simple. Marcus stirred his coffee, staring at the dark surface. "Then do something about it," he said. Jacob swallowed hard. "If I speak out, he could ruin my career." "But—" He looked at Marcus directly now, his jaw set. "I'll back you up if you decide to report him. I'll tell the truth." It wasn't a promise Marcus had expected, but it planted a seed of strength inside him. Later that day, Marcus walked through the campus library, the quiet hum of students filling the vast space. Evelyn was at one of the tables, surrounded by books. She looked up as he passed and quickly waved him over. "Marcus, I thought about last night," she whispered urgently. "I can be a witness. I'll write a statement. He humiliated you in front of us all." Marcus nodded slowly, his chest tightening, with a mix of gratitude and fear. If he went through with this, it could change everything. Professors like Harlan had power, and Marcus was just a scholarship kid trying to keep his grades high. But silence felt like surrender. That evening, Marcus printed the report he had written. His hands trembled as he placed the pages into an envelope and walked across campus to the administration building. The walls were tall, marble floors gleaming, a place that felt colder than the autumn air outside. He stepped into the dean's office. Dean Whitmore, a stern but fair woman in her 50s, looked up from her desk. "Mr. Carter, what can I do for you?" Marcus handed her the envelope. "This is a formal complaint against Professor Harlan," he said, forcing his voice steady. "What he said to me in class yesterday, it wasn't just inappropriate. It was racist. It was an attack." Whitmore raised an eyebrow, took the envelope, and opened it carefully. As her eyes scanned the pages, her expression tightened. She looked up. I take this very seriously, she said. There will be an investigation. Do you have witnesses? Yes, Marcus said, his heart pounding. At least 2, maybe more. Whitmore nodded. Then we'll begin immediately. Thank you for coming forward. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Whispers traveled through the campus. Some students avoided Marcus, not wanting to be dragged into controversy. Others gave him nods of quiet support. Jacob and Evelyn submitted their statements, their words echoing Marcus's own. Professor Harlan, meanwhile, carried on his lectures as though nothing had happened. But his glares at Marcus grew sharper, his tone colder. It was a game of intimidation, an unspoken warning. You'll regret this. Finally, the hearing was scheduled. A small room in the administration wing with a panel of 3 faculty members and the dean at the head. Marcus sat at one table, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Across from him, Harlan sat stiff, his jaw clenched, his lawyer beside him. The dean opened the session. We are here to address allegations of discriminatory conduct against Professor Harlan. Marcus's heart pounded as he recounted everything. Harlan's words, the way the room went silent, the humiliation that still burned in his chest. He spoke clearly, though his voice wavered at moments. Jacob followed, then Evelyn, their testimonies steady and unwavering. Finally, it was Harlan's turn. He leaned back in his chair, his voice dripping with arrogance. This is absurd, he scoffed. I run a rigorous course. If a student can't handle criticism, that's their weakness, not mine. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest, but he stayed silent, gripping the edge of his chair. The dean's eyes narrowed. Professor, criticism is one thing. Telling a student they don't belong because of their background is another. Multiple witnesses confirm this occurred. That is not rigorous teaching. That is discrimination. Harlan shifted uncomfortably, his confidence faltering for the first time. 2 weeks later, the verdict came. Marcus was called into the dean's office again. She looked at him with calm resolve. The investigation has concluded. Professor Harlan is being suspended, effective immediately. He will face disciplinary measures, and his conduct will be noted permanently in his record. Marcus exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every student who might have faced Harlan's prejudice in silence. As he walked out of the office, the autumn wind brushed his face. Students passed by, unaware of the storm that had just ended. Jacob caught up with him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. You did it, he said. No, Marcus replied quietly. We did. Evelyn joined them, smiling faintly. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt the campus was his again. Not Harlan's, not anyone else's. His father's words echoed in his mind. They'll try to push you down, son. You don't let them. Marcus lifted his head high, the leaves swirling around him like confetti of a quiet victory. He belonged here. And now, the university knew it too.